Welcome to another Black Marble BiteSize. This is the first in a series of interviews with our Microsoft Most Valuable Professionals. I'm Catherine Outram, Head of Business Development at Black Marble and interviewer of this session. So on our virtual sofa today, we have our Chief Technology Officer and company co-founder, Richard Fennell. So to get us started, Richard, could you please tell us a little more about yourself and your specialist technology areas and why you've been recognised as a most valuable professional?
Certainly. My name's Richard Fennell and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Black Marble. I'm one of the founders. We formed Black Marble over 20 years ago, and I've very much worked in the area of looking at how we produce our software. So this is working internally and also consulting with external organisations on how to improve their software development process. I've done a lot of work with Microsoft Team Foundation Server, as it used to be called, and now Azure DevOps services. And for the work I've done in that area, I've been recognised by Microsoft as a most valued professional for developer technology, specifically for the Azure DevOps toolchain.
You've got a webinar coming up titled Benefits of Successfully Managing Your Dev Test Estate in the Cloud. Could you start off by giving us a brief overview of what this session will cover?
There have been plenty of sessions on how you can save money by moving things into the cloud for your production usage, but not too many of them focus on the dev test area. And the needs of dev test are quite different to production. So in this session, what we aim to be doing is to show you how you can move things in a cost-effective way up into the cloud. So expanding the areas of things that are testable because of the infinitely available resource in the cloud, but also doing it in a cost-effective manner. So you're not having to spin up something that costs as much as it does to run in production for a short-term test usage. So we're looking at a selection of tools and techniques that make that possible.
How has the technology toolset changed over the years?
Over the years, the technology tool sets have changed greatly. What they aim to achieve is fundamentally the same, but the scope and the ease of adopting many of the techniques that you'd wish to use is made much easier by the reach of the modern tool chains. It used to be that if you wanted to build the type of things that we call as DevOps these days, you were going to be writing an awful lot of scripts yourself in whatever scripting language was your favourite. Now we've got a lot of tooling that will do much of that heavy lifting for you. And also in Azure, what we often find is there are services that are available to us that will provision out systems in an automated manner that previously would have involved a lot of manual steps. So I suppose the key change has been the ease of automation in the modern tool chains.
Have you seen an improvement in the tools available to manage your estate over the years?
There have been great improvements in the tools over the years that are available to you to manage your estate, whether it be on premises or in the cloud, and more importantly these days, the linking of the two. The key change has really been the ease of automation. Modern tools are written with a view to automation being the norm, that you're going to use automated release pipelines to do much of the work. Whereas historically, if you wanted to work that way, you tended to have to write things yourself, which wasn't impossible, but was often a thing that got neglected on an awful lot of projects.
As CTO of Black Marble, what tools do you advise your staff use for best practice and successful project delivery?
The best tool for any job is the one you should be using. So it's appropriate tools is the key thing. You know, there is no one size fits all tool that will do absolutely everything for everybody. A tool that works for one organisation might not be great for another. But that said, there's some commonality of things that you always want to consider. The key really in any sort of DevOps scenario is you want to automate the process. You might want human approvals in the process, but you need to automate it in some manner. So that means the key tool you're always going to be falling back to is something that allows automation. And the underpinning will be some form of scripting, PowerShell, Bash, something like that. But normally that will be wrapped underneath a tool that will allow you to orchestrate your automation. So the one we use the most is Azure DevOps Pipelines as a part of the Azure DevOps suite. It's the part that will actually take the source code that you've got, compile it, and push it out to wherever it needs to be in a controlled, repeatable, and automated manner.
So what do you see as the benefits of utilising Azure as opposed to keeping your estate on premise?
The key advantage for looking at a cloud solution like Azure as opposed to keeping your estate on premises, is fundamentally a cost of flexibility and cost saving. Historically, if you wanted to provision a new system, you'd have to buy the servers, you'd have to rack them, and then they would be available for you to do your work on. So there's a major capital outlay. With Azure, what you can do is you can provision your systems out quickly because all of the infrastructure is already available. You don't have to wait for it to be delivered. You only have to deploy it. And then you can work on it, paying for only the services that you use. And as soon as you don't need it anymore, you can rip the system down and so have no ongoing cost. This is interesting for production workloads, but for dev test, it becomes a very interesting way of working. If you want to test out a new theory, a new way of configuring an existing system, you can make a copy of your production system in Azure, try out all the experiments you want to do, and then remove the system as soon as you are done with it, hence greatly reducing the cost and the need for having standby tin that you can run your dev test systems on. For most companies, looking at moving their dev test scenarios into the cloud will offer some cost savings, but more importantly, it makes life much easier to try out new ideas quickly, easily, and so look for the advantages that you can get in your systems that only come through experimentation.
On the topic of Azure, what is it about this cloud platform that you would recommend?
All of these services available in Azure are deployable using the same technologies, and this becomes the glue that underpins all of the deployment and development dev test scenarios. So really the key advantage for Azure is its commonality between services. There's many services there, everything that you should need, but you can access them all in the same way, which really does make for a flexible solution.
Where do you see cloud platforms such as Azure making the most impact in an organisation?
The way cloud platforms are built is probably the biggest area that has an effect in their adoption in any organisation. The move from a capital purchase to an ongoing cost means that you only pay for what you actually use, a consumption model. So that means you can start to experiment with things that you could never have chosen to have done in the past. I've certainly worked on projects where previously a team wanted to try out a new concept and the hardware wasn't available, there would be a multi-month purchase cycle for them to get appropriate hardware. Whereas with Azure, even for the largest system, somebody can spin up that system in a few minutes or hours at worst and give something a try. And if it works, great, they go ahead. But if it doesn't work, they spin the system down again, delete everything, and they'll only have paid for the usage, probably a cost of a few pounds. So this key consumption-based model makes the cloud very interesting for any new development. And it means that a team can afford to be far more experimental in their ideas. If you've got an idea that you want to try out, if you can just spin up a dev test environment, try your idea, modify it, delete it, whatever you need based on your tests, you only pay for what you use. That's normally a very attractive model for any organisation and probably the main reason that people are looking for cloud solutions.
Is there any advice you would give to a company just starting in their cloud journey?
When a company's starting on their cloud journey, it's very tempting to just rush ahead and start doing everything very quickly. Open up the Azure portal and click, click, click away and start creating stuff. There's some dangers if you do that. The first and obvious one is you start provisioning loads of things, forget to switch them off and end up with a huge bill. So having some governance over how you provision things, what you switch on, what you switch off is important. Now, I'm not saying don't dive in and have a look with the Azure portal and try things out. That's exactly what it's there for. Just sort of make a note of what you're using and make sure you switch it off afterwards. It's simple advice, but can have a big bearing on your costs. In a slightly longer term, when you're starting up, a company should really focus about how they're going to do their provisioning. It's easy to go into the portal and start creating things, but if you want a repeatable process, what you want to do is have scripts run that will provision out whatever services you're using in Azure. And these are Azure Resource Management templates, ARM templates. Getting into the habit early of using ARM templates will greatly improve the robustness of your development process. If you produce an ARM template that will deploy out your production environment and it's suitably parameterized, you could run that same template again and produce a dev test environment or a QA environment or a separate environment for pen testing. Investment in the template pays over and over again every time you run it. Whereas if you've gone in and created your environment inside the portal with just clicking in menus, can you remember exactly what you clicked at every step? You probably can't. And if you have to produce 4 or 5 environments, if nothing else, it's a lot of work and the chances are you'll make a mistake. So the biggest thing I would always recommend to any team is think what you're trying to do before you rush ahead and try and automate it using ARM templates so you get a repeatable process every time. And then you'll really start to see the benefits.
We always talk about how DevOps underpins any cloud operating model at Black Marble. Could you elaborate on that for us?
At Black Marble, we really do try to practice what we preach. We tell customers use DevOps, put in automation, track work in work tracking systems, use automated build, all of these techniques. And we aim to do all of that ourselves. So every piece of code we write is always stored in the source control. We never ship code that's been built on a developer's machine. It's always been built off an automated build process that can run extra levels of validation and checking. And then we will use automation whenever possible to deploy that out to where it is needed. It's important for us to follow the processes we advise others to do, else that advice just doesn't look very credible.
You've also written a white paper titled Successful Software Delivery with DevOps. What kind of topics do you discuss in this?
The white paper, Successful Software Delivery with DevOps, looks at a number of different areas. It's really 2 broad themes. The first is how, by picking the right Azure subscription, you can save money. You might naively think that you just want to use your production Azure subscription for all of your dev test. You can do that, but it's quite an expensive way of working. Far better is to use one of the other types of subscriptions, which I go into details of in both the webinar and the white paper, that are more appropriate to dev test workloads. The second major theme is the services that are available in Azure that are specifically there to aid dev test scenarios. Now, some of these are very global things like ARM templates, but other ones are specific services like the dev test labs that gives you a very cost-effective way of running dev test environments and provides budgetary and regulatory control on top of existing other Azure services, thus making it far easier to adopt good DevOps practices in Azure without breaking the bank.
And finally, do you have a DevOps top tip to leave us with?
My DevOps top tip is to look at automation. We always talk about that we don't want developers who are not lazy. If a developer has to do something more than once, they should be thinking about automation. Once you get into the realm of DevOps, you probably don't want to be doing it once before you think about that automation. It wants to be automation first and foremost. So always think, when you're starting to do something, I need to write a script to do this. It's always tempting to go for the portal in Azure and just start clicking to add something because it's quick, but it won't pay in the long term. So it's really invest in that automation early for long-term gains.
Thanks, Richard. That's all been incredibly insightful and useful information. As mentioned earlier in the interview, Richard will be presenting a webinar on the 20th of October when he will elaborate on many of the topics discussed in more depth. You can also get in touch with us if you would like a copy of Richard's white paper. Thank you.